Hello everyone, David here, and it's back! The Walking Dead has returned, and of course with it comes my reviews for each episode of the new season. It is of course the 5th season, and we now have our first episode, so let's go ahead and just talk about it. Let's just jump right into it, because this is one of the hottest things to talk about, and it's one of the things to easily spoil. So obviously this video will contain spoilers for the new episode, which is entitled No Sanctuary. Something that we were led to know from the get-go in the season finale for season 4. So if you have not seen the newest episode for The Walking Dead, then chances are you'll probably already know what it's about, because if you have a Twitter account. Godspeed. But if you have seen it, let's go ahead and talk about it. So this was like the second part to the finale of season 4. Like the finale for season 4 was part 1. This is part 2. If part 1, which was the finale for season 4, was Deathly Hallows part 1, which is all the development, all that, and the setup. Part 2, which is the premiere for season 5, is like Deathly Hallows part 2, which is like nothing but just action. And that's essentially what this episode was. It was a 42-minute little mini action movie, because there was hardly any sort of development with the characters or the background or the story. It was mainly just Rick and the group trying to get out of Terminus, and that is essentially what the episode is all about. Planning, seeing where they're gonna go and navigate, while other characters, and they're all sanctioned off. You got Rick inside of Terminus, while you also got Michonne and Coral and Maggie and the rest of them inside the cart. But then you also got Carol going on her little mission to try to get them out once she overhears this one dude talk about Terminus and putting 2 and 2 together, instead of wondering, oh, maybe this is a sanctuary, along with Tyrese and the baby. And so it's all essentially the same kind of mission, but it's like a Phantom Menace type of scenario where you got everybody in different places but trying to do the same thing. And I think it worked. I really liked this episode. I didn't think it was one of the best episodes that The Walking Dead has offered, but it's a nice way to kind of resolve the cliffhanger that we were left with in the season 4 finale. The most proactive of them all would have to be Rick, Daryl, Glenn, and Bob, who were inside of Terminus and finally get out of their really grisly situation at the beginning. Way to start off the episode by having all these guys getting their throat slits and just being poured into that vat. That gave me a good sense of how gruesome Terminus had become, and that was cool. It's just a shame that it was organized in a very convenient way, because they literally ordered those guys that were gonna get their throats slit in order of importance. You got all of the characters that are not gonna die. At least you didn't think so, because when they got to Glenn, you're like, and if you read the comics, you're kind of like, oh shit. But like all convenient scripts play out. Something happens that interrupts the whole thing. So that was my only nitpick, is that it was very convenient, not only how they were ordered, but also right when you think that a character is going to get taken out, something happens in the background. And it's almost like they were kind of self-aware. There's that shot where Rick looks at the guy at the very end, and you can tell from the expression on Rick's face that he's like, you're going to die first, because I'm Rick. I'm like the main character, so between you and me, who do you think is gonna die first? Yeah, okay, I'll just be over here applauding. It is also in this scene where we see more of Garrett, who is being set up to be the main villain of Terminus, and if he is, I'm a little disappointed, because he just feels like a routine bad guy, and there's just nothing that special to him. Even when they showed those flashbacks at the beginning and at the end, and seeing how his character was the only shred of development to not only this episode, but also the background behind Terminus. That whole thing about how this place used to actually be a legitimate sanctuary, but then douchebags came, and it is there where they learned that, okay, we got to be cannibalistic douchebags to live, so we're going to become cannibalistic douchebags in order to survive. I did like that, but it was over and done with within this episode, and there's a part of me that feels like maybe it would have been nice to stay in Terminus just one more episode. That's it, just one more episode to, like I said, develop this place, to make me think, man, this place is one big tragedy, because it could have been a sanctuary away from all this horror, but it too was consumed by the morality of life and death, and ultimately choosing death to be able to survive. that would have been fascinating to explore a little bit more. But then, not only is it over and done with, and Terminus literally goes up in smoke by the end of the episode, but then they cut back again to another flashback, and they're like, "We're gonna take it back. How? Why do you leave us hanging on that if we already know that they did take back Terminus?" And I thought it would have been nice that in the flashback that they show at the end, where it says then, they showed the aftermath of Garrett and the other people that wanted this place to actually be a sanctuary, standing on top of a bunch of corpses, becoming those animals that they thought that they would never have to be, but did end up being. Instead of leaving us with the thing of hinting at possibly more flashbacks in the next episode, which I really wouldn't like, because we already know the outcome to Terminus. If you're gonna wrap up that whole thing with Terminus in one episode, then just show the wrap up so that it could be parallel to the present time of Rick taking out Terminus with his group. With that being said, will we see more of Garrett? I mean, it looked like he got shot in the shoulder, so maybe he'll pop up eventually, but at the same time, if he did get taken out, really wouldn't mind, because he didn't seem that interesting of a character. And if you must know, I literally have not seen any trailers or commercials or promos for this entire season. You know, that trailer that got released at Comic-Con and all that, I didn't watch any of that. So I don't know if Garrett is coming back, and in what kind of form will he be coming back. So don't tell me, don't post anything in the comments, or else your ass is gonna get deleted. But back to what I was originally saying. The most proactive of the group were Rick, Glenn, Daryl, and Bob, who were taking out guys within Terminus, getting machine guns, doing their stuff, and they were doing some pretty badass stuff. Who I feel got the short end of the stick were all the people inside of the cart. You know, Maggie, Carl, Michonne, all of them. I mean, they spent the entire time making weapons, and sure, they used them, but by the end of the episode. So I was like, I wish they could have done a little bit more than just hanging around waiting for Rick to save them eventually. And then we also got Tyrese, who finally gets back to doing what is necessary to protect those he loves, Judith in this case, by killing that one guy, who I found kind of interesting. I found him more interesting than Garrett, but there was also that part of me that was like, as interesting as the points you're making are, you need to go out in this episode. Unfortunately, he does, and it is there where we complete the cycle of Tyrese coming back to being the guy that needs to do what needs to be done, instead of being a wimp saying, "I'm not gonna kill, I'm not gonna kill." Finally, that's over with. Who I felt was a total badass was, of course, Carol, doing her own Solid Snake type of thing. Okay, not really, but you get what I'm saying. Doing her own thing inside of Terminus, and man, that moment where she shoots that gas tank or whatever the hell that thing was and blowing it up, I out loud was like, whoa, because that was the defining moment for this episode. That was the highlight. It's just a shame I can't say the same thing for some of the zombie kills, because I mean, the zombies getting killed in this episode were alright. You know, there were a couple of shots that were gruesome, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. Now, the walkers actually eating people, okay, maybe this was directed by Greg Nicotero, who's the makeup artist and the one of the showrunners for season 4, and I believe also season 5, and written by Scott M. Gimple. And I'll be damned if at some point during the writing and producing of this episode they thought, you know, remember those B-movies, those zombie B-movies that were cheesy but we really loved? Why don't we put some of that stuff in here? Because there were some human kills by the zombies in this episode that are really cheesy. And I mean, for those B-movies from like the 50s, 60s, whatever, they fit. Or the 70s for that matter. But here, it's The Walking Dead, you know, and they felt a little out of place. Like, you got one shot where this guy is crawling back to escape a walker. Get up. And then there's another guy that comes out of a cart, and he's like all crazy. He's like, "You're just like me. You're just like me." And then the zombie just goes like that. It felt like something out of Zombieland, alright? The horror comedy movie. And it did make me laugh, sure, but in that awkward kind of way where it just didn't belong. But luckily our group gets out of Terminus, and in one of the sweetest moments in The Walking Dead in quite a long time, we get the reunion, the long-awaited reunion, Carol with the group, especially with Daryl, and seeing I legitimately out loud said, "Oh," when Daryl just ran up to Carol and just gave her a huge hug. That was very endearing, and of course the second hitter, the 1-2 punch of emotionality in this episode, having Rick and Carl reunite with Judith, because you got to remember this is their first time seeing this, so they're like, "Holy shit, they're alive!" So it's sweet moments like this that are going to make some more heartbreaking moments later in the season, because they're probably going to come much more effective. And I dig that. Sure, it's a little manipulative for the writers to do, but that's essentially what a screenwriter or television writer is supposed to do in this case. And I really liked that moment at the end of this episode. It's a good capper to a season premiere, and it's a very sweet one at that. And what's also kind of interesting is that now that we wrapped up with Terminus, and like I said, I kind of wish we could have stayed in Terminus just one more episode so that we can get a good sense of that background behind that place. But I'm also okay with them being done within one episode, so that now we can get our rather huge group here, because in that last shot where they're walking by the train tracks, I'm like, damn, these are a lot of guys, a lot of people here. Chances are a good portion of them may or may not be gone by season's end. But what I'm getting at here is that now with Terminus being gone, and with I can't remember, I don't know why, but I can't remember the army dude's name with the red hair. Abraham something, Sergeant Abraham. Oh, what? Abraham something, I can't remember, but Abraham and Eugene and all of them, they haven't told Rick, who's the leader here, about the whole thing with Washington, D.C., but he says that he eventually will. So I'm interested in seeing how that plays out. Now that we got them out of Terminus, they're also away from the prison, will we get to a much more urban setting? Because I'm tired of the woods. I am tired of the woods. I get it, you guys are on a budget, but you gotta get out of the woods. Okay, you gotta get to a much more urban place. That's not a little town like in season 3. It's not a farm like in season 2. It's a city. A city that these people can use to their advantage to find refuge and sanctuary, the type that they couldn't find in Terminus. And that would make for a new dynamic to add to a new season. And it's the right way to go. So overall, really enjoyed this episode. I didn't think that it had too many things going for it, but at the same time, it's the kind of episode that's not meant to develop any sort of character. It's just meant to get our characters from point A to point B while delivering some cool action sequences. And it's the type of episode that more mainstream audiences are going to love, because they're like, yeah, we get to see characters do awesome things instead of just talking to one another. I appreciate those episodes of them talking to one another, because I love that kind of stuff. Develop characters, make me care for them. But ever so often, I also appreciate episodes like this, where we can step aside from that for a little while and focus on some action. And I think that this episode did that very well. So for that, I give the Season 5 premiere of The Walking Dead, No Sanctuary, an 8 out of 10. Really solid episode, and still looking forward to seeing what this season is going to be offering. So let me know what you guys thought of the new episode. Did you guys think that it exceeded your expectations or not? And I'll catch you guys next time. Take care.